So, this week's featured topic is one that we've been meaning to cover for a while, right? Making space for birding in unexpected places. And Dustin, you somehow always manage to find space for birding. I know that as your spouse. I would like to start with an obvious question, though, since you selected this topic for this week. What does making space for birding actually mean to you?
Well, let's be honest. Life doesn't always give you the perfect trail or the perfect free afternoon with a couple of hours to dedicate to something esoteric. So sometimes you're traveling around for completely unrelated reasons, but birds still find a way to show up. And if they show up, I'm going to notice them. So whether we're in a suburban neighborhood or whatever, there will be birds to be found. Suburban, urban, whatever. Birding doesn't require a dedicated schedule. I might just get up and go out at sunrise because no one else is awake and it's a good time to see what's around. Or simply bird from my windows. My binoculars, my bins are coming with me. Next is it's about awareness more than just planning. Planning can be helpful, but you could do no planning and be aware and have just as rewarding an experience. For me, the enjoyment is also in the planning because I'm doing birding from my desk, so to speak, even if I'm not outside. And you can bird in short windows, whether it's 5 minutes here and there, outdoors, from the car, even making a little game about it with yourself to find like the first bird of your trip when you arrive. I'm going to annoy you and tell you what the first bird is just so that you know I'm doing it. Or keeping like a trip list for the birds that you see during the duration of the trip. And those opportunities come up all over the place if you're tuned in, even if it's a non-birding dedicated trip.
When we are in the middle of other things, how is it that you're actually still managing to notice birds in those moments? And maybe what kind of situations do you like to then take advantage of to squeeze in some extra birding time?
Well, first I like to familiarize myself with the most common birds that I might see at my destination, right? We see house sparrows and mourning doves and stuff like that here all the time, but the common birds like that somewhere else might be lifers, right? So there's always the potential for a new lifer. So I get myself familiar with those. In this case, we're going to Atlanta, and they have, for example, Carolina chickadees. Carolina chickadees look pretty much just like our black-capped chickadees we see outside all the time. And in places where those two distinct species overlap, they're really hard to separate from one another. But down in Atlanta, they only have Carolina chickadees. So what will seem like a common bird to you will be a lifer for me. So being prepared for stuff like that really helps you, notice it in the moment. I'll also be on the lookout for brown-headed nuthatch, which is a bird we don't have here and would be a lifer, and brown thrasher, which is a bird we do have here, but not nearly in the numbers that exist down there. And that's a really good one, like a mockingbird, but tougher and a little bit bigger. They're a cool bird. So partly it's being in tune with what you might see so that when you do see it, it strikes you. But then I'll, use my ears and my eyes to see something flitting around when we're walking from one destination to another, whether it's from a hotel to dinner, from the car to the museum or whatever. Even waiting around in parking lots, because in parking lots and restaurants, gas stations, even grocery stores are notoriously good for like fish crows and other opportunistic birds like gulls. And there's some gulls in Georgia that we don't see as much up here. And then early mornings are great. Oftentimes, if you're an early riser like me, it's an easy way to get out and do some walking when other people, it doesn't impact anybody else's schedule. It just happens that, I'm able to walk in. Frankly, with this sciatica situation I have going, it might do me good to get out and walk for an hour before anyone else even gets up, because maybe I'll get into the good place faster. Looking out the windows, cars, airports are good. Airbnbs, often, they're chosen for Airbnbs because they have good situations. And taking advantage of those situations can help. And then training yourself to just be, always listening and looking. In urban areas like Atlanta, a bird like a common nighthawk could be really good. Common nighthawks are really drawn to all the bugs that are flying over a city or over a ballpark. And they'll be migrating pretty soon as well. So I'll definitely have my eyes on the skies looking for common nighthawks, even though I won't see them here until May.
Okay, so you've mentioned some interesting places specific to Atlanta that you're already thinking out. And I know that you've birded in some interesting places like cemeteries. You mentioned grocery store parking lots. Why do those kinds of spots actually like work for birding?
Yeah, different spots work for different reasons. So first, let's think about the urban oases. Oases? Oases? I think oases. Urban oases. So some green spaces have simply become programmed into birds' migratory paths, right? An obvious one is like Central Park. Imagine you're a bird migrating up the East Coast and you get to the shit show that is the Northeast with all these tall buildings and bridges and roads and hardly any grassy areas. And then you see Central Park. Man, that is a magnet for birds migrating. So Central Park is sneaky one of the best places to bird on the whole East Coast because it's simply an obvious magnet for migrating birds. So those sorts of urban oases happen on the small scale too. Next is birds that have adapted to human environments. So you have stuff like pigeons and mourning doves and birds like that can be anywhere in suburban environments. The backyard birds or the birds that come to feeders wherever you happen to go, they're not just at feeders, right? They're in the trees, in the parks. And if you take a walk around a suburban neighborhood, you're going to see the stuff like mourning doves or the local version of a mourning dove and the chickadees, even though it's not the same, even though it looks the same, it's not the ones that we've had. So that kind of stuff that we talked about. And then places like cemeteries are sneaky good because first off, they're a green space. They can be that kind of magnet. They often have really nice water features, which birds love. And cemeteries, well, they've usually been there for hundreds of years. So they get programmed into birds, migratory patterns, and they're going to have resident birds like owls and things like that, that like the open space and the natural edge habitat that a cemetery mimics. And over those hundreds of years, they've been intentionally planted with a wide variety of ornamental trees. And in cemeteries, there's a lot of kind of invasive or at least non-native trees that were planted just for their beauty. And that's okay because if you plant lots and lots of non-native trees, you're going to get lucky and still find some trees that attract the right kind of bugs and birds for those. So cemeteries can be sneaky good for birding for all of those reasons.
Yeah, and one of our favorites around here, right, is Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, which is absolutely exquisite. If you're not local to the area and you're ever traveling through the Boston area, highly recommend checking it out. It's absolutely beautiful to walk around. There's specimen trees. The sculptures for the different grave sites are amazing, and you love to bird there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Sweet Auburn or nicknamed Sweet Auburn for a reason. It's got all the stuff I mentioned, and it's actually more intentional than most cemeteries for native stuff, but it's got a wide variety of things, numbers of water features. It's even great for seeing foxes and coyotes and things like that because it is really hemmed into Cambridge.
You mentioned grocery stores and specifically grocery store parking lots. What's the deal with parking lots? How is that a good place for birding?
Well, parking lots are kind of naturally edge habitats. Even if you don't see trees and shrubs, there's probably some behind the store, that kind of stuff. They have lots of food waste around. There's often dumpsters. Sloppy people spill food or there might be an overflowing trash can, stuff like that aren't great for people, might not be the right thing, but if you're going to do those things, at least it's contained.
Yeah, now that I think about it, there's more than one parking lot in my life where I've seen a pigeon with a French fry.
Exactly. So there's food waste and there's excellent high perches on those lampposts too, right? So they can be sneaky good for stuff like fish crows and ravens and gulls, the opportunistic birds. And in places like Alaska, grocery stores attract bald eagles for those reasons.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, bald eagles are like crazy scavengers. We think of them as being fierce. They're not so fierce. They steal from other birds and they'll eat anything they can find.
Okay. Any really unusual places?
Yeah, I mean, even city drainage areas and like retention ponds and stuff can hold big surprises. Like shorebirds, you could see an egret or, um, sandpipers or killdeer or things like that. Um, Little blue herons in retention ponds down south. I'll be on the lookout for those wherever we drive this week. So those can be good. Highways also make for really good, like highway medians, because highways are kind of a migratory landmark. Birds sort of follow I-95 northward, for lack of a better way. So it's not about the beauty of the space, it's about the habitat and the resources that the birds can take advantage of.
Like many of our family trips, this one coming up is not a birding trip. But are you planning to find a couple of moments here and there to try to get out there? Um, and second to that question, I guess my next question would be like, how do you find the balance? Because you already shook your head. Yes, you intend to find some moments. How do you find the balance between the two women in your life, your daughter and your wife, and all of the things that we are energized to do on trips and being able to nurture this passion as well?
Yeah, so it's about not making a big deal about it, not asking anyone to alter their plans and not interrupting the flow of a conversation like you said, but staying open to the possibility. So let birding fit into the flow of the trip and not to take it over at any point. Don't force anyone else to acknowledge something. And I can slip it in as a joke here and there, like, "Oh, did you see that?" Whatever. Um, in the downtimes, right? Not to distract anyone from the activity of the moment. But knowing just when to enjoy that moment and take note of what I'm seeing. There certainly will be birds that I see and they go off in the mental checklist in my head, and you're not even going to know about it until maybe I'll share that trip list with you, at the end of the trip. And so then, you can build in around what's already happening. So we could be having coffee at an outside cafe. I can be checking out the birds in the trees, across the street or whatever. We could be strolling through a park, enjoying a nice day and get some birding in. And we're going to the Georgia Aquarium. So, like we said before, sometimes there's unexpected places that naturally have good birds overhead. I don't know how the Georgia Aquarium manages their fish waste and other stuff like that, but it might mean that there's a decent natural kind of fauna happening around the Georgia Aquarium. So I'm
Okay.
interested to see about things like that. But on that example, Disney is on that topic. Disney's a really great example of this. We didn't go to Disney birding, but we saw lots of friendly white ibises crawling around Adventureland looking for, chicken tenders and popcorn that might have fallen to the ground. And in the savannas over Animal Kingdom, there's lots of swallowtail kites and really great naturally occurring birds that are benefiting from the environmental diversity that Disney has brought to that area.
All right. So you mentioned it already yourself that you have this mental list of what you saw on a trip and just in general, even if it's not a trip, even if we're trying to just get the grocery shopping done. Why do you do that? Like, what's the value of this mental list?
Well, partly I'm doing it all the time, even if I'm at home, but it'll be more memorable to me and help anchor the memory of that trip and that bird, especially if it's something I wouldn't typically see at home. But even seeing familiar birds in a new setting can be meaningful because, birds have regional dialects and they sound a little bit different from here to there. So, for example, song sparrows are a common bird that but they sound regionally very different in different places. So it's interesting to me to hear a bird sound differently than I'm accustomed to, or I'm not the most auditory birder, but I do know when I hear a bird I've not heard before, and that often piques my attention. So it'll pique my attention that way, even if it's a common bird that just sounds uncommon to me.
Okay.
That's one. There also can be different behaviors in different habitats because some birds are not super habitat specific, and they might be that way here, but not quite have such high fidelity to their habitat during migration. And so we're going to be a little ahead of migration by going down to Atlanta. So we'll have that opportunity. And then you just start to associate birds with different places, and different sort of species stick in your memory. The same way you might think of a song and it takes you to a time and a place. I can think of a bird sighting that takes me to a time and a place. I know that the time I saw a northern goshawk on our lake was October 8th of that year.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it just is the way that it works for me. So it gives you a record without the pressure of looking for something. And I'll certainly enter anything notable that I see over our trip into eBird, so it'll create a digital record. And if there's anything new, I'll have it as a first of year, or both a first of year or a lifer bird.
Okay. So I noticed earlier today, as we're preparing for our trip, at one point, you were checking the bird apps like you do a lot of the time before we travel. What are you looking for specifically to prepare for our trips?
Yeah, a couple things. I like to get a feel for what's common in the area and getting familiar with the area itself. So the other day I asked you for the address of where we're staying, and I like to zoom into there and see what natural spaces are around, whether it's conservation land, a park, a cemetery, whatever, and have a place where I know I could, whatever, if there's heavy work talk or something happening for you and your friend, maybe I'll bail out and head over to that nearby park or golf course or whatever. So that's helpful just to know the geography. But also I like to look at the hot spots on eBird and take a look at the checklist that other birds have submitted. And I can see in those checklists what's been common, present recently, or present, all the time. And that's how I got to, earlier I mentioned I'll kind of be on the lookout for Carolina chickadees and brown-headed nuthatches and brown thrashers. Those are good birds I don't see at home very often. So that's a good way to get in tune with that. Sometimes I'll even listen to the calls. So for example, the brown-headed nuthatch is really closely related to the white-breasted nuthatch we have here and the red-breasted nuthatch. And I can discern the white-breasted and the red-breasted because I see them at home, but I don't know what a brown-headed nuthatch sounds like. So I will review the sounds that bird makes so that if I hear it, I can zero in on it and find it. So there's all of that stuff. So I like to focus in on what's likely to hear, not just chasing the rarities. Certainly in a non-birding trip, I'm very unlikely to, come across a rarity, and I won't chase one because that's not the purpose of our trip. But even this kind of casual preparation really helps you notice more what's there and make the most of your time. For example, I was in Shanghai once for work, and I knew I wasn't going to have much opportunity to bird, except for like really early in the morning before I was meeting up with my coworkers to head to the office. So I looked up People's Park in Shanghai and saw that every checklist had light vented bulbuls, which are common like house sparrows are here. And I went to that park a couple days in the morning looking for white vented bulbuls, saw them in spades, and the black-crowned night herons, black-crowned night herons were a bonus. But it got me a couple lifers just like that.
Any last tips for our birder friends out here on YouTube when it comes to like the adventure of birding in unexpected places?
Just to be open to it at all the time, right? A final reminder, it does not matter if you're in the middle of a national park or standing outside of a grocery store. Ooh, trash dumps and transfer stations are great places for birds too.
Awesome.
Oh, I should have gone. There were some kestrels reported at our local transfer station the other day.
Yeah.
We should have gone there today. Damn it.
We had no time for anything else.
Missed opportunity. But the birds don't wait for those perfect opportunities, and they don't read maps. So if you're paying attention, even just a little, you might be surprised to find amazing birds for your life list in a place that you just didn't expect.